everybody, I'm Gail Z Martin, and together with my husband, Larry Ann Martin, we write the Wasteland Marshals series for Falstaff Books. Wasteland Marshals is the first novella in the series, and the second novella, Witch of the Woods, is now out, and they're both available on Kindle and paperback and KU. So I'm going to be reading from the first novella here, Wasteland Marshals, and it is near future post-apocalyptic. But given the current unpleasantness, let me add this, that it is not without hope and the good guys win. I think that's important to say, and it holds true for all of my books, because while we may put the heroes through total hell and they may be scarred and battered by the end of it, the good guys win. And that's my promise to you, that, at least in my books, that much of a happily ever after happens. Good always triumphs. So here we go with Wasteland Marshals. I miss pizza. Shane Collins looked up at the broken neon sign for the abandoned pizza restaurant with a sigh. The world practically ends and you miss pizza, Lucas Maddox echoed. Among other things, Shane replied. The mom and pop roadside motel they planned to squat in for the night sat across a crumbling highway from the old pizzeria, sparking memories and a pang of loss. Yeah, lots of other things, Lucas replied, as he finished checking out the empty motel lobby to assure no unwelcome surprises awaited them. 3 years after a clusterfuck of epic proportions had effectively stopped the 21st century cold in its tracks, ruins like the old motel had become reminders of what had been. Hey, it's got a solid roof, the walls are cement block, and we can bring the horses into the utility shed overnight. We've done with worse, Shane pointed out. Which was true, Shane thought. As partners in the U.S. Marshals, they had spent many nights holed up in mid-priced hotels safeguarding witnesses. Before that, in the Army, they'd survived miserable missions in bombed-out villages. The comfortable suburban childhood they'd shared as friends since elementary school was another relic of a world that no longer existed. The two men were a study in contrasts, though they were both 35 and within a half inch of the same 6'2" height. Shane was blonde, with what Lucas always joked was an all-American cowboy look. Lucas had dark hair and eyes, rocking more of a bad boy vibe. That had made it easy when the job demanded playing good cop, bad cop. And the floor is tile. I never thought cheap motel carpet could get any worse, but it did, Lucas replied. A few years without heat or cooling turned most hotel guest rooms into breeding grounds for mold and wild animals. They had learned the hard way that the motel office usually made a better shelter, tile floor, less furniture, and good visibility, and in some cases, like tonight, a real fireplace. Lucas had already poked and prodded at the flue until he felt sure they could light a fire relatively safely. After a cold ride from their last way station, he seemed positively giddy about the possibility. I brought in our bedrolls and saddlebags, Lucas said, as he rose from where he knelt next to the 1970s-style hearth, dusting the soot off his hands. There's some grass next to the parking lot that looks safe for the horses to eat. You want to take the horses over to graze and then down to the pond while I go looking for firewood? Yeah, and I'll bring up a bucket of water to boil. Warm food would be a nice change. He headed out to the gravel parking lot where they had tied Lucas's black stallion and his own roan gelding. They had named them Shadow and Red, respectively, unimaginative but functional, though they had long joked about more colorful names from the fantasy novels and games they liked, more along the lines of Sleipnir and Shadowfax. Shane had argued that both of those names took entirely too long to say, though the thought still made him smile. Come on, you two, let's get you fed and watered before it's full dark. Shane led their mounts over to the grass that stretched down to a small pond, then stood guard as they began to eat. 3 years ago, the idea of trading in their black SUV for a pair of horses would have prompted plenty of cowboy jokes and incredulous chuckles. Shane ran a hand along Red's side affectionately. He'd grown fond of both horses, although he'd probably always miss heat, air conditioning, and the protection from the elements he'd once taken for granted in the confines of a vehicle. The pond was part of a small park. Its gazebo and playground looked to be in good shape, although the area was as deserted as the motel. Gazing at the green space gave Shane a peaceful feeling, something difficult to come by these days. He let himself enjoy the view, then frowned as he strained to make out music so distant that he couldn't be certain whether he had heard it or merely imagined the song. Shane looked all around but saw no one in sight. It seemed odd, but it wasn't the first time he'd had something like that happen. Shane chalked it up to his imagination and turned his focus back to the horses. Lucas's shout broke Shane from his thoughts. Come on, he told the horses, tugging at their reins. He didn't dare leave them unprotected and loose, but Lucas needed his help. The horses came with him reluctantly, and he ran as fast as he could with them in tow, sending them into the relative protection of the shed he and Lucas had scouted earlier. He closed the door behind him and headed toward where the shouts had sounded. He came around the corner, his crossbow drawn. Lucas was down, fighting for his life against a huge black dog. Only it wasn't a normal dog, Shane knew, as he tried to get a clear shot where he could hit the attacker and not Lucas. A Grim only looked like a large, ugly dog, the size of a sow with black matted fur, bat-like ears, and red eyes. It was really a revenant, a supernatural creature, and so nothing but iron or silver would do the job. Shane squeezed the trigger, sending a silver-coated arrow into the monster's front shoulder, hoping like hell Lucas didn't manage to move into the shot. The creature reared back and howled in pain, turning its glowing red eyes on Shane. Blood covered its sharp teeth and powerful wide jaw, and Shane feared he was already too late. The Grim's hesitation gave Shane the time he needed to reload, and this time the crossbow bolt caught the Grim between the eyes. The creature toppled over, covering Lucas in its gore. Lucas! Shane rushed forward, alert in case the Grim had not hunted alone. Usually they were solitary creatures, but nothing worked the way it used to, and Shane had learned the hard way not to take chances. Lucas groaned, trapped beneath the body of the dead beast. Shane slung his crossbow over his shoulder on its strap and hefted the Grim off his partner. He couldn't tell how much of the blood was the Grim's and how much was Lucas's. "Got shoulder," Lucas moaned. Shane knelt beside him, triaging the wound. Lucas's shirt and jacket were ripped and bloody where the Grim had sunk its teeth into the meat of his upper arm, and a swipe of the creature's claws had opened a set of gashes across his chest. That's bad, Shane thought. He fought down panic and thought quickly, then shimmied out of his own coat long enough to strip off his flannel shirt and rip it into pieces. Shane wadded up one section to staunch the flow of blood from the bite, then tied the wad in place with what had been a sleeve. He did the same for the chest wound. How bad? Lucas managed. More than I can stitch up, Shane said. We need to get you help. Not far to Green Farm. Lucas hated admitting pain, so the fact that he was panting gave Shane an idea of just how bad it was. Yeah, far enough, Shane muttered. Gonna have to get you to the farm. I'll get the bags, then we need to go. He pulled Lucas to his feet as gently as he could and pretended he didn't see the tightness in his partner's face or hear the moan he bit back. Shane had a thinner, narrower build, while Lucas had always been more muscular. That made hauling his injured buddy all the harder, since Shane swore Lucas weighed a ton, although in reality they were both lean from scant rations. Lucas stumbled beside him as Shane kept his gaze fixed on the motel. The trek seemed to take forever. I'll be back, Shane said as he eased Lucas into a plastic chair in the lobby. He grabbed their bedrolls and saddlebags, then went to the garage to fetch the horses, all the while expecting another Grim to show up to finish the hunt. Shane got the horses ready and then led them back, hoping Lucas remained conscious. When he returned to the lobby, his friend was pale and shaky, but still awake. Okay, you gotta stay with me, Shane cautioned. Probably gonna hurt like hell. I'll drag this chair out beside Shadow and then help you climb from the chair to the saddle. Fuck off, Lucas said, but the weakness in his voice took the heat from his comment. I can get on my horse. Falling would be bad, and you're in no condition to make decisions. Shane ignored Lucas's bravado, feeling vindicated when Lucas could barely keep his legs under him for the short distance between the lobby and the horses. Shane dragged the plastic chair along with them, then steadied Lucas and half lifted him as he stepped up and swung his leg over the saddle. Do I need to tie you on? It wouldn't be the first time they'd ridden with one of them hurt. No, just fuck it hurts. Don't take the long way. Shane hoped he had kept his worry out of his expression, but Lucas knew him too well to be fooled if he hadn't already figured out the danger for himself. He fastened Shadow's reins to his own saddle, so Lucas only had to worry about keeping himself in the saddle. Not for the first time, he missed the convenience of GPS and the efficiency of ambulances and emergency rooms. Hell, even a hospital would be an improvement, he thought. But they were out in the country on the outskirts of Mercer, Pennsylvania, and the small rural hospitals had shut down long ago as the power failed and the supplies ran out. He came to a crossroads and debated which way to go. Both led to Green Farm, but Shane couldn't afford to find out that a damaged bridge or other obstacle blocked their path. Lucas still bled steadily from his injuries, and even the best care Shane might find in time would fall short of a trauma center. It wasn't until he'd already made his decision, trusting his gut, and started down the road, that Shane realized he'd followed the path where the faint song in his mind sang the loudest. That is the beginning of Wasteland Marshals, which is the first in a near-future post-apocalyptic series from Falstaff Books. And the second book, The Witch of the Woods, is now out. Look for them on Kindle and KU, and I hope to see you soon.